Hey, ladies and gents, and welcome to the Controlled Interest Gamecast, where we talk about video games and everything happening in the industry. Episode 76. As always, I'm joined by Jordan.
Hello, Jared.
No Dom this week. We didn't have an episode last week either. I was having some construction done on my roof, so it would have been really loud, and I couldn't really do anything about it. I'm not going to tell the guy, like, hey, stop working on our roof. Yeah, that's why there wasn't any episode last week. So just hop into it, what we've been playing. It's been 2 weeks. I haven't been playing a whole lot of, like, a variety of games, but I've been playing a specific number of games a whole lot. So the first thing I want to get out of the way, my Destiny 2 update of the week. I finished the raid multiple times now. I'm currently in the process of finishing the raid just in hopes of gathering all of the raid armor. It's just like a personal goal of mine. I'm 304, max light level is 305, and the only thing I'm missing is a 305 Titan mark. I have everything else 305. I have a 304 Titan mark. It's just the one thing that's holding me. So if I happen to get the raid Titan mark, I'll be 305 and good to go. And once I get that raid armor, I think I'm just good. I'm going to quit cold turkey on Destiny 2 till the DLC. I'm not buying the DLC 100%. I'm going to wait and see what it is, because I remember a lot of people got burned with that first set of DLC for Destiny 1. It wasn't until, what was it called? Not the Iron.
It was House of Wolves, then Vault of Glass, right?
No, Vault of Glass was the name of the first raid. It was called Iron something. Harvest? No, that's not right.
That's you're thinking of Easy Allies.
Yeah. Anyways, so I'm holding off. I'm gonna hold off for the first piece of DLC for Destiny 2, just in case it doesn't live up to the potential or whatever. It's not 100% a buy for me. Anyways. Also been playing Cuphead. I said last time we spoke that I would finish the game and I would start grinding to complete the game. I completed the game. I'll talk about the end of that game. But what I wanted to say first is that I'm currently going back and trying to get A marks on all of the levels. And the thing I really enjoy about this game is when I started this game and I was playing through the levels, I was like, man, getting an A rank in all of these levels is going to be difficult. It's going to be a task. I'm going to have to sit there and grind. As I'm going through and trying to get these A ranks now that I've completed the game, these bosses are way easier the second time around, because obviously my skill has progressed. Yeah, and it's way easier, and I'm like, oh, I can do this in my sleep. Maybe not in my sleep, but like it's way easier. It's like night and day, right?
Yeah.
So the end of the game. Have you gotten to the end, Jordan?
No, I actually haven't gone back to it since I said I was going to restart. Okay. I haven't even restarted.
Do you mind me stating something about the second to last boss? It's not too spoiler. I just want to explain something real quick, if you're fine with that.
I was actually listening to Mr. Tim Geddes talk about it on the way home on the Kind of Funny Gamescast. So, go ahead. Okay, so this is something that I disagree with Tim on. Tim talked about how it was frustrating, and it changed the pacing of the game in a negative way, and he felt it was the only area where he kind of felt like he hit a wall. Let me preface this by saying I completely understand every point he made and where he comes from. I think me and him just approach this second to last level a lot differently. So I'm gonna line it up for you, Jordan, as best as I can, and I'll explain to you my process, okay? So the second to last level is a set of 16 little blocks, 1 to 16. 16 being the end mark, and you want to get there. A dice pops up that you have to parry, and it slowly rotates with the number 1, 2, and 3. Maybe not slowly, but it's not like super fast, right? So, looking at the dice, you can time it to parry on the number. It's not hard at all. It's not one of these things where you have to like sit there and super focus. There's a lot of leeway, in my opinion, to get the number you specifically want. And what happens is, depending on the number you parry, that's the spaces you move forward. Okay, so there's the beginning space, then there's 3 spaces that are all bosses. There's a safe space, then 3 spaces that are all bosses, then a safe space, 3 spaces that are all bosses, a safe space, start over, and then the end. Right. So there's these 3 level chunks in between. Now So are those checkpoints?
No, there's no checkpoints at all. But I'll get to that real quick. So the 9 spaces for the 9 bosses are all new bosses you haven't seen in the game before. They're all very new, but they're not multi-stage bosses like any of the other ones. They're one stage, one simple rotation of their movements and attacks, and they have like 1/3 of the health, or maybe like 2/4 of the health of the other bosses in the game. So it's not apples to apples at all, right? So the way I played through it is that first section of 3 bosses, I figured out, I specifically landed on each of them to figure out which, because you have to land on one of them, you can only move a maximum of 3 spaces. I figured out which one of those 3 bosses I felt was easiest to me to beat. And I wrote that number down. So I was like, okay, the second boss on these 3, I can do no problem. So I wrote that down. So every time I restarted it, I made sure to hit the dice roll of 2, so I landed on that specific boss, right? This is also another thing with Cuphead. If you play the same boss over and over again, you get used to it and you get better at it, and it just becomes muscle memory, right? I did that throughout, so I figured out which boss on each individual thing I knew which one to hit. So I would hit 2, then I would hit another 2 so I can get to the safe space, and then I just figured out the 3 bosses I would need to beat. That's it. Simple. And I obviously knew how to hit the dice, so I would never get the start over thing. My honest opinion, like, you just, I guess, don't really pay attention to the fact that you can, I guess some people think it's randomized or something, but it's like, I mean, Jordan, it's really easy to get the number you want on this, dude. Like, really easy. So, like, when you're at that second to last space and you're like, I can't roll a 1, I need to roll a 2 or a 3 to get to the end, it's like, you can easily make that work. The way some people are talking about this is like, it's super random, it's difficult, it's frustrating. It's really not, to be, in my opinion anyways, and I'm not some, like, platformer savant or something, but I just found a system that worked. I figured out the bosses I needed to do, and I systematically approached it like that, right? Completely worked for me, finished it, went on to the devil, played the devil, finished it, finished the game. So I just wanted to get that grab out there because I've seen a lot of people talk about that second to last boss, and I'm not discounting that. For some people it might have thrown off the pace of the game and they didn't like it, or they found it too difficult and not rewarding. But for me, when I first saw it, I figured out the approach I wanted to make with it because I understood what was at hand. And man, the dice roll is like super easy to get. So that was just something for me because I hadn't gotten to the dice part yet before I heard Tim talk about it. So I was like, ooh, I'm worried because I was in love with Cuphead, right? I'm like, oh man, I hope it's not the way he's talking about it. And I went in and I was like, oh, I understand what works for me. So I found it super approachable and easy to get through, you know?
So even though I'm pretty early on where I was at when I stopped, there's obviously a lot of timing that you have to get right in many different instances. So it just seems like another instance of that, you know, more often throughout the one battle, but I still think sounds manageable.
Oh, yeah, and throughout the game, there's these 3 mausoleums you go to, and they actually help you get better at parrying, and I think that's a huge thing, too. Like, this whole game builds upon itself, which I love, and, yeah, I really don't think that end part was difficult, man. Like, I understand some people got frustrated with it, but I do think if they would have approached it a lot differently and understood things a little bit more, I think they would have had a lot easier of a time, you know?
It does sound like they switch up the pacing, though, pretty hard for that, because, I mean, you would know better than I, but it seems like they're just 3-stage bosses for the most part up until then, and then even the one after that. So, the stages.
So, the last couple of bosses before you get to the end where you fight the dice guy and then you eventually fight the devil, there's multiple bosses that have more than 3 parts, and a lot of the bosses you get towards the end have like 4 or 5 parts. So at the end of it, what happens is you fight these, and if you're good at the dice roll and everything, you fight a minimum of 3 bosses, like I stated, like the way I worked it, that are only 1 stage, and then you fight the Dice King himself, and I don't think that boss fight is really hard either. It's all about parrying, too. It's actually one of the easiest boss fights in the game, I think, when you get to him. So it's like, just think of it like a 4-stage boss, and I don't think it's actually that hard. Tim also talked about how, like, took 8 minutes to complete. For me, it took, like, closer to, like, 5 minutes. But remember, that's because I forgot the proper, like, I was just very efficient at it. I knew, because...
Right.
I only did 3 bosses because I knew how to figure that out and do the dice roll and stuff. So I don't know if somebody like him who was just like hitting the dice trying to get there was fighting 4 or 5 bosses. You know what I mean?
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's just, for me, the way I approached it, it felt great for me. I do want to applaud them for, after you finish the game on normal, you get an extreme difficulty mode, and that's the only way you can S-rank levels. And
Fucking
no,
Christ.
the only thing it changes is the speed of hits. From what I've seen so far, it doesn't seem to add any new stages or anything. So as you've already played through this game and you know these bosses, you just go back and you have to be a little bit more skillful and speedy at your maneuvers. But like I was able to S rank a couple of levels, and I'm not sitting there gnawing away at it, trying hard, like, you know, getting super angry at it. It's just coming with the skills I've built up through the game. And yeah, I'm enjoying the game. I don't know if I'll 100% it or not. I only need like 8 achievements. Some of them are a little too much for me, like beating the end boss or beating the game on extreme, which is getting all S ranks and levels. I don't think I'm going to do that, maybe. Just because I think I'll eventually do it, but not at the current stage we are with all these games coming out, right? That's not my priority right now. Anyways, that's enough about Cuphead. Still love the game. It's in my Game of the Year contender. Really love it. I love that it alludes to the possibility of a sequel without saying, like, we are doing a sequel. Those endings I like because they provide enough closure for people who are okay with it, but they give enough optimism to those who want more. So I think that's cool. It's like a half-open door kind of thing, you know?
I'm expecting an expansion.
Yeah. Any more content from this I would love. The other thing I want to talk about, and I won't go too long because I've already been talking for a bit, and sorry for the dog in the background. It's just going to happen this week, unfortunately.
I can't hear it.
Okay. So I've been playing Breath of the Wild as well. That was the third game I've been playing, and my goal was to finish this game, mainline it, before Super Mario Odyssey came out. Already have Super Mario Odyssey preloaded, ready to go. Can't wait for tomorrow. But yeah, my goal was to mainline this game and finish it. I got the first Divine Beast down, the Elephant Divine Beast. Really fun. I think the Divine Beasts are, like, so far for me, the best parts of Breath of the Wild because they're what I expect out of a Zelda game. The shrines are, like, really boring to me, in my opinion. I've only done, like, 14 of them, and I'm already kind of bored with them.
You don't like them little puzzles?
I like them, but, like, it's just not enough carrot on a stick for me, you know? It's like, cool, and I think this goes back to the deteriorating equipment. It's like, I can work hard to try to get that extra chest in here, for what? For, like, a sword, it'll be damaged after, like, 3 fights. I don't know.
It's more the orbs, which allow you to upgrade your health and stamina.
Yeah, but even then, though, that doesn't give me enough of a carrot on a stick for me to enjoy them. It feels more like a tedious side quest or something in another RPG. You know, I'm like, oh, I have to go and do a couple of these shrines to get another heart, whatever. Like, I'm just not enjoying them, to be completely honest with you. I enjoyed, like, the first, like, 8 or 9 of them, but I'm already, like, kind of bored on them. So I completed the second Divine Beast as well. I did the Gerudo Town Divine Beast, which is a giant camel. I liked you having to cross-dress to get into the city. My other complaint is, so you know when you've done that Divine Beast, have you, Jordan?
No, like I said, I really got sucked into the world and the side stuff, and I don't even think I finished the first Divine Beast. I got to it, but I think that's like where I would be at right now if I jumped back in.
Okay.
Yeah, I got real sidetracked on that one.
And I think I would have too, but I was specifically playing in mind of doing mainlining stuff, right? Because I didn't want to get sidetracked because I knew Mario was right around the corner. Yeah, so my issue with it is during this Divine Beast, you have to go to the Yiga clan's hideout, and you have to defeat their boss. In that middle section, when you get there, you have to do this, like, stealth section where you have to, like, throw stuff to distract the enemies, and if you don't, this gate comes down, and it's impossible for me to kill a majority of the enemies, and I die, and I have to restart. Now, I'm not griping on me dying to these enemies, because they're meant to be difficult no matter what point of the game you're in. Considering the fact I'm mainlining, it's going to be extra difficult. That's not what I have a gripe with. I just don't think the stealth sections are enjoyable. Like, I don't think there's a lot of creativity to it. It's not something that I enjoy repeating because it feels to me whenever I would get caught, it wasn't because the game was designed well. It was because it was designed cheaply, in air quotes. Like, I don't know. I just didn't think the stealth sections were designed very well. And I understand, Breath of the Wild is an open world game. It's not stealth gameplay that you're looking for. But this was something that was impeding my progress to a Divine Beast, which is a big section of the game.
And there also is a stealth mode where you can drop Link down into stealth mode.
Yeah, that's what you have to do.
If it's going to be there, then make it good.
Yeah, I didn't enjoy that. I will eventually go back and play this game. I'm not going to mainline it anymore just because that was kind of my goal. And because I didn't do that, I'm not going to focus on that anymore. I'm just going to play it as is whenever I'm done with Super Mario Odyssey. But, I enjoy this game. I think this is a very good game. It's nowhere near, anywhere near my quote-unquote top 10 for the year at all.
Wow.
I just am, and it's strange because, I don't dislike the game. I just am not really having a whole lot of fun playing it, if that makes sense.
I mean, it's funny because I'm playing the devil's advocate here for you, but I was more negative than anybody that I had known, or heard. Yeah. And I think it's a very good game. I think it's a great game, but I don't think it's the masterpiece that everyone made it out to be. And I'm hoping that that's not the case with Mario Odyssey, because clearly the games media industry has rose-tinted glasses for Nintendo, and that's pretty upsetting. We've talked about that before. Yeah. And I have no doubts that Odyssey is going to be great, but I'm just hoping that hyperbole is not present here as well. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think that my big issue with Breath of the Wild 2 is people talk about it as reinventing the open world game and stuff like that. And I said this. Yeah, this was one of my big concerns before we got our hands on it, or at least before I got my hands on it, was that to me it didn't seem like it did anything special. The big thing people always talk about is that you could climb everything. And to me that's technically not correct, because you can't climb everything because you have a stamina meter. So unless you have full stamina, not every wall can be climbed to the top. You can start climbing it, and then you can fall.
If you got your pack filled up with
potions and stuff,
food to boost you.
Yeah, exactly. So that is climbing's all right. I think sometimes they use climbing to their disadvantage, where they use it as a crutch for making areas of the game interesting. So it's you have to climb this part to get somewhere, and the only thing that's interesting here is that there's guardians set up specifically to where you're going to be climbing. You know what I mean? Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. It just, the world doesn't feel very full. I think the world is one of the most empty open world games I've played. And there's probably examples of open worlds being way more empty. I'm talking about specifically my personal experiences of not, I don't know. You've run into very few characters, and don't get me wrong, there's some side characters I've ran into that I love, but majority of them are just why are we even having this conversation for the most part? I guess for me, the difference is in playing Elder Scrolls or Fallout, or even I haven't played a whole lot of Witcher, I think 10 hours. The thing to me in those games, and obviously Witcher I think does it way better than the other two, when I talk to people, even if they're saying some nonsense that doesn't mean anything, I care about the world they're talking in, so I can relate it to things that I know about the world, right? Whereas in this game with Breath of the Wild, it's they're saying some stuff and I'm just this doesn't matter to me. This holds no weight at all. This conversation could not happen at all. So I don't know if it's just my gripe with the world that they built. I don't know. I'm not super...
Part of that could be the fact that they're not voiced. Because they did this stupid half-ass voice thing where they're we'll voice, some of the cutscenes, not even all of them. Yeah. And then all the characters around the world, they're still just dialogue bubbles. It's it's so half-assed, and people have been waiting for Zelda to be fully voiced for so long, and then they do it in this way, and I just really don't like that aspect of it. So that may be why those characters aren't affecting you.
Personally, too, I think the locations, the Water Kingdom, which I can't remember the name of, it's something's... God, it's escaping me.
Zora's
Domain.
Zora's Domain, yeah.
Those cities, I expect when I'm entering the empire of an entire race, for it to be on a grander scale than it is. I expect this town to be huge, and maybe it doesn't need to have a lot of like, you know, houses you can get into and all this stuff. Like, I want a little bit more grandeur to it. Like, these are supposed to be these empires, you know, these giant towns, these bustling metropolises in this apparent large open world. And to me, my experience is, okay, I need to get to Zoro's domain. It's the kingdom of these like fish people. I get there, it's like 2 walkways, 3 walkways, and like a throne room, and I'm like, this is your kingdom?
Yeah.
In this giant, vast open world game. Like, I think the smallest towns in Skyrim have more personality than the towns I've run into in Breath of the Wild. You know, Gerudo Town and Zoro's Domain, it's like, oh, they're just these small areas. Like, I expect more from, like, you hear about going to these kingdoms, you know? Like, I don't know. It just, I hate to gripe on it a whole lot. I hate to be the pessimist. Like, I still think it's a great game. It's just, there's a lot of things it isn't necessarily doing for me that I would expect from an experience. I'm going to continue to play it after Super Mario Odyssey takes away most of my time. I'm going to get to finish this game. I want to see the story. But I just don't see a lot of what people put this on a pedestal for, you know? So, I don't know.
I think you're being totally fair, and I think that, you know, we need some people that are willing to speak more honestly and more in a more level-headed sense about these Nintendo games than isn't just, you know, blinded by nostalgia. So I can appreciate that.
Yeah, it's like, for me, they feel like Mario towns, and the reason I'm making that direct comparison is because I'm about to play Odyssey. Like, in Mario, it's never really been about the story. It's about the platforming and all these activities you can do. So when you hop into a Mario game, in my opinion, and you know the desert level with the ice that we've seen in Odyssey, when there's like 3 or 4 buildings, I'm okay with that because I'm like, yeah, this isn't supposed to be a city. These are like areas I check in on with Mario, and then I go and do the rest of what Mario is. With Zelda in this open world game, the way they're making it seem is like, no, this is a Skyrim, Fallout, Witcher type adventure for Nintendo. When I go to these cities, like I said, that are supposed to be the empires of these races, and I get there, and it's just like, it's such flat architecture, for at least for Gerudo Town. There's not a lot of pompous or circumstance. Like, there's not, I don't know, they just don't live up to the expectations that they try to set for themselves, you know? Yeah, I don't know.
I definitely think they were trying to make an open world with the size that would rival other games of this day, but I think that they didn't realize that they weren't at all, you know, living up to the density of those. And it would have been dense enough if they had just kind of truncated everything and pushed it into a smaller map, but they wanted to spread everything out so that their map looked comparable to other maps.
I also think it would be more forgivable if we had a number of legitimate dungeons. Like, I think the shrines are fine, but my only like true Zelda experience in this game is the Divine Beast, because they're actual dungeons where I have to go through and figure out things, and they're multi-layered, you know? The shrines are fine, they're very simple. I mean, they're difficult sometimes to figure out, but they're very simple in their mechanics. But, like, if there was more, like, actual dungeons in this game, I think I would be okay with the lack of grandeur in the cities. But the fact that there's, like, these very sparse shrines everywhere, it's like instead of getting, like, a whole meal of 3 really good entrees, they gave me hundreds of sides, you know?
Yeah.
That's what
I totally agree.
And that's fine. I think that's what Nintendo thinks people like about open world games, is this giant world with a bunch of little things to do, and I agree to an extent that that's what people like in open world games, if you also have these set pieces or core things that people enjoy that they can do in between all of the little side things. And I think this game is full of little side things, but nothing prominent outside of 4 Divine Beasts. Four things in the entire game, you know? So,
right.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's not all the way there.
Yeah, and once again, good game. Not my game of the year. Hopefully Odyssey will be that. I don't know. I have a lot of expectations for it, so hopefully it meets that. But I'm done talking about Zelda. I'll talk about it with Dom too when he gets back. But I didn't want to come out and be pessimistic about it. I think there's a lot of good things with the game, but I feel like the asshole, you know, because I'm like one of the only guys that's like, oh, I don't like this. And I'm hearing all these people like, I love it, and I'm not saying they're necessarily lying. But, like, for me, it doesn't do a whole lot, you know? So.
Hey, welcome to the club, man. I felt the same way for a long time. So.
Yeah. What have you been playing, though? I've been talking a whole lot.
No, you're good, man. It was a good discussion. First of all, I want to say we'll have a more Switch-centric topic once Dom gets back, kind of evaluating the system. But I just want to say, at the beginning of that conversation, you dropped the fact that you had preloaded Mario Odyssey, and I was like, wait, what the fuck? So I went and got my Switch and went into the store. I had already put some money in there just so that it would be set aside and ready to go for Odyssey. Excuse me, and I see that in the coming soon section, Mario Odyssey says pre-purchase on it, and I had just been in the store a couple days ago looking at other stuff and saw the coming soon tab, and it didn't say pre-purchase. So I just want to say that's real bullshit. That first of all, the fact that the console didn't launch with the ability to preload games, because that's been on 3DS for years now, and it is a modern gaming console that should absolutely be able to do that. Just like you and I were talking about the lack of Bluetooth before the show and how egregious that is. And then, I look at the other games that are coming soon in the store, and Mario's the only one that you can pre-purchase. And so it's just, like I said, we'll get into it more with the full topic, but there's just a lot of stuff, like almost logistic wise with the Switch, that is just kind of bunk. It's really kind of obnoxious. And so I just wanted to call that out because that's really dumb. I'm preloading it now, and obviously that's well before the time it's going to unlock tonight, but just stupid.
The only reason I knew about that is because I was watching, I think, Games Daily yesterday, or maybe it was Easy. I was watching something, and they were talking about, couldn't have been Easy because they record early. I think it was Games Daily, and they were talking about, I pre-downloaded Odyssey, so it's ready to go, and I was like, what? I was like, what?
Yeah.
Wait, my ears sprung up, and I was like, okay, go and click, pre-download.
Yeah, exactly what happened to me just a couple minutes ago, so yeah.
Sorry.
No, yeah, you're good, man. It's some frustrating crap there. But anyways, what I've been doing these past couple weeks, speaking of ye old Switch, I've been playing The Flame and the Flood.
Hell yeah. That's on my to-buy list.
Yeah, it is former BioShock Infinite Irrational Games developers that unfortunately got canned at the end of that game's cycle when it was released. And they made this game similar to like Don't Starve or something like that, where it's you're just out there trying to survive in the wilderness and getting food and getting supplies and this, that, and the other. And it's as you would probably expect, it is pretty damn difficult, and it's challenging. It's brutal, I would say, in the way it treats you. You gotta like really figure your shit out. It's not gonna you're not going to start with any food items in your pack or anything like that. So you got to go get rolling as soon as you start the game up. And I got pretty far on my second run. I haven't been back to it since then, but spent hours and hours with it just doing that, floating down the river to these different sites that you meet up on your raft. So that's a really cool game. Also, this was something else I was going to mention in our Switch topic, but I'll go ahead and mention it now since I'm talking about this game. One thing, especially with these ports, but I noticed it even with Zelda, these Switch games, man, another logistic thing that really needs to be taken care of and can be taken care of with updates, but I haven't seen any updates that have taken care of this, and it's been months now since the system was released. When you're playing it on docked mode on your big screen, like, you can read menus and you can read text bubbles if you're playing Zelda or whatever on screen just fine. But when you go to handheld mode and it's on that tiny little screen, there's no formatting change. And so a lot of times, I noticed this with Flame and the Flood, and like I mentioned other games, like I said, there's no formatting change in the text or the menus or anything like that. And so it's formatted for a big screen, but it's not. And so you're kind of squinting. I've had to you're playing with it maybe a couple feet away from your face, and then you have to go in real close just to read the menus. And that's just basic shit that should be taken care of, and that people should be thinking of when they're porting a game to a system like this. I realize it's, one of the first major hybrids in the industry, and so that's probably why this is happening, but it's something that's pretty frustrating and definitely should be taken care of. So hopefully that'll get better in the future, but that is a problem I've noticed with Flame of the Flood. So besides that, I've been playing, of course, Shadow of War, probably 15, maybe 18 hours into that.
Oh yeah.
Just a real fun open world to go around and fuck up orcs in, put something else on the side on the second screen and just enjoy myself there. So I've been playing plenty of that. And then actually today on my Vita, they had all 3 games in the Zero Escape trilogy on sale. So I started 999 today on my Vita, which is a Japanese visual novel, if you're not aware, by the same, I think, publisher, Spike Chunsoft, that does Danganronpa, if you're familiar with those games. So pretty cool so far. It is, it's basically the Japanese version of an American adventure game where you're having to find items and combine them and figure things out, little puzzles, and get, trying to escape certain rooms. And some of the normal concerns that people have, or normal issues that people have with those games, are there. For example, a really funny example I had today was I got locked in a freezer, and I was trying to get out because this pipe had bust and frozen the door shut. So I'm trying to get this ice off the door, and we have this dry ice which could help melt it, and it's in a bag, and then you can combine items. So I'm looking at what I have in my inventory, and I started playing this game with a walkthrough just because the one of the issues that I have is the first room. You start up the game, and the very first room that you wake up into is quite a bit more difficult than anything else I've experienced in the game, and I'm a decent chunk into it at this point. So it's really kind of weird that it would be that much different, and really obtuse the way you have to put this code together. So I'm doing as much as I possibly can on my own and relying on my own intelligence whenever I can, but then if I'm just completely stuck, then I just have this walkthrough open next to me, and usually it's just one tiny step that I need to figure out, and then all the other 10 steps or whatever I'm doing on my own. So anyways, the freezer, I've got this bag of dry ice, and I'm like, well, what do I do? What do I combine with it to get them to to get it to work like they want me to? And I'm trying to put it in a bottle. I'm trying to I have a knife that I could cut it up with or fuck with it with. And I look up on the walkthrough, and the solution is to hit it with this piece of frozen chicken that you have in order to break up the dry ice. And I was just like, how was I supposed to make that connection? How was I supposed to make that connection? You have a knife. I could break it up with a knife, but it's no, you just hit it with your frozen chicken, and then it's good. It's broken up into pieces. I'm like, okay.
That's one reason I don't really like adventure games sometimes, because it's they don't do the obvious connection. No, it's no, you got to do this and this. Come on, dummy.
Yeah, and people make that comparison all the time. People have that issue a lot, and it sucks because it's great animation, it's great storytelling, the characters are interesting, the plot is interesting, and all that. But then it falls into the same old issues that so many adventure games or Japanese visual novels have. And so I've just reserved to I'm not going to beat my head against a brick wall. I've talked about this before. I have no issue playing with a walkthrough or a guide, just because I've beaten hundreds, maybe even thousands of video games in my lifetime at this point. It's not a question of whether I can do it, it's a question of whether I want to take that much time to figure it out on my own, and at this point in my life I just don't. So whenever I get stuck, I've just got that handy dandy guide ready for me, and that's made it, that's alleviated those frustrations for me, fortunately. And I'm not just jumping right to it. I'm giving myself some time to try to figure the shit out on my own. But I don't know how I would have figured out. The frozen chicken goes with the dry ice.
Well, obviously, yeah.
Yeah, and then after you break up the dry ice, then it's like, oh, I could maybe make a bomb. Your character says, oh, I could maybe make a bomb on this with this dry ice. And then it's like, oh, well, I have a bottle. I have an empty bottle. And then I put it in the bottle. And then it's like, all right, well, I have to get it to where it doesn't fall off the door. And then I'm like, oh, well, I have this piece of rope. And so, shit works out after that. Yeah. It's just that hiccup right there. So stuff like that is a little bit frustrating. But so far, I'm enjoying it otherwise. And it doesn't seem like it's going to be a super long game. So I'll probably jump on to the next couple after that. And I also have the Danganronpa games, I should say, on my Vita. So, I've not necessarily dabbled too much in visual novels, but it's certainly something I'd like to get more into, especially since I am so into anime, and that's kind of what they are, the crux of those games is. So, yeah, I've been playing all 3 of those games. Other than that, I've been watching Mindhunter, the Netflix series from executive producer David Fincher, who is one of, if not my favorite film directors. Just a little side note, I think that, David Fincher also executive produces House of Cards on Netflix. And, his last movie was in 2014. That was Gone Girl. And he's got plenty of movies out at this point, but they're still kind of rare. They're not, every couple years, I would say. And so I'm glad. I'll talk about how much I really enjoy this series, and I do enjoy House of Cards as well. But sometimes I'm kind of like, well, I want to see you do a film, man, because you're really fucking good at that. You're one of the best out there. And I just got the news this week that he turned down doing Star Wars, which I almost can't even imagine, seeing how he's one of the darkest directors in Hollywood, doing things like Seven and Fight Club and Zodiac, Girl with the Dragon Tattoos.
He turned down 9, right?
9? Oh, episode 9. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
See, because I could totally see him for 8. You know what I mean? Because that makes sense for the story arc. But 9 is supposed to be uplifting, or you would think at least
triumphant. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, so that was kind of odd. But one thing I was talking about, how I'd kind of like him to get back to film. I'm sure he will at some point. But I looked at what he's got upcoming, and his next film, Jared, is World War Z 2.
Ugh.
I'm like, what the fuck? Now, I mean, he makes really dark movies, and so he could have some really dope zombie film, but I haven't seen World War Z, so I won't judge it. But from what I've seen and what I've heard from people, it's kind of a basic movie. It's a good movie, but it's not great or anything.
It's not World War Z. If it had any other name, it'd be a fine, forgettable zombie movie. The fact that it has World War Z attached to it's kind of even more discomforting, because for somebody who read World War Z, it's nowhere even close. It misses the mark on so many accounts. It doesn't even make sense as a movie. It should really be an anthology series on Netflix, a la Black Mirror or something. I have a lot of gripes with World War Z starring Brad Pitt.
Is the book worth reading?
Oh, 100%, Jordan. When I understood that you hadn't read it yet, I was like, oh, that's weird, because you're usually the one that reads stuff before I do. You know what I mean? You would love it. I guarantee you it's
I'll take
great.
That rec.
Yeah.
Take that rec. But you're saying the same thing I've heard before, is that it's kind of just a decent zombie movie, and not something. It's not like Zombieland or anything that's subverting the tropes and really making you think, or really making you laugh, or really making you sit on the edge of your seat or anything. So it's why are you doing World War Z 2? I would rather you direct Star Wars Episode 9. Come on, David Fincher. Yeah. So, I mean, he's just got such a great catalog. And so, that's a long side note. But anyways, back to Mindhunter. Mindhunter is a Netflix series. He directs the first 2 episodes and the last 2 episodes of the 10-episode season. And he's executive producer, so it has the feel, just like House of Cards has the feel of his, dark and brooding style. And so it's basically about these FBI agents who were researching serial killers back in the late 70s, but this was before the term serial killer had really been invented. And so they mentioned calling them sequence killers, and they're going to these different places around the country and interviewing these guys in jail. And of course, you know, it's really some fucked up shit that you see in there, some really dark conversations. But, you know, it fits perfectly with David Fincher. It's really interesting how it's historically, you know, a real thing that happened, and how this concept, I mean, not that there weren't serial killers beforehand. Obviously, like, you would consider Jack the Ripper a serial killer, but the fact that the term was invented, you know, really only about 35 years ago or so, I guess 40 years ago or so, is really interesting. So this series is really great. I definitely recommend it, especially if you are a fan of Fincher, or if you're just a fan of psychological thrillers or dramas in general. So really enjoying that. Just a couple episodes away from finishing that up. And anything else I want to shout out? Let me think here. I might end up remembering something by the end of the show, but, you know, a lot of it's just keeping up with the weekly series that I already watch.
Mindhunters is in my queue. I just finished Atypical, so Mindhunters might be the next thing I hop to.
Yeah, it's really good stuff.
Yeah, let's hop into the news. So, a couple of news stories, and then we're going to be talking about a couple of specific topics. The first news story, the Kinect is officially dead. Really, officially, it's dead. Writes Owen over at Polygon. This shouldn't come as no surprise. This was kind of in the making. Essentially, Fast Company reported the demise of the motion sensing device introduced in 2010 for the Xbox 360. They are going to stop manufacturing them. They're going to still have support for the Kinect, so if you have one, don't worry, it's still being supported. But if you're planning on buying a Kinect for some reason, if you don't already have one, if you have an Xbox...
Who are you, first of all?
Exactly. The thing I want to say, since this is kind of our send-off to Kinect, is it has a lot of warranted gripes for it. I think it was a piece of tech that they had a lot of promise in and didn't obviously live up to that hype and stuff like that. But I personally love my Kinect. I use it for voice commands. People say that, like, theirs doesn't work or they have to yell at it. I personally have never had that experience. My Kinect has always worked fine. I've always been able to use it to turn on my Xbox, do certain tasks. I've found it great. That being said, if we could retroactively go back in time and remove it from Xbox 360 and Xbox One, that could lower the price. I wouldn't be opposed to that because it'd be an interesting way of seeing how things played out. One thing I want to say is these people have this idea that if the Kinect wasn't on the Xbox One, it would have sold better. The Kinect being on the Xbox One wasn't the main reason the PS4 got to the lead it did. It was a little attachment to the reason why, but the Don Matrick thing was the whole reason, you know? People are like, oh, no, if it didn't have a Kinect, man, imagine. I'm like, I don't think it would have been much different, you know?
A wise man once said, Don Matrick can eat a dick.
Exactly.
And I don't
remember who that guy is. I'm going to miss the Kinect because I've had a great time with it, but completely understand why it's dying, why they're not going to, manufacture anymore. I'm
glad they're giving up on it and moving on. It had some good memories, just with the family, especially with that stuff. And just like we did with Wii Sports, but that era of gaming is over. And as you and I were talking about before the show, it'd be nice if voice controls were implemented more smoothly in the next consoles, because people don't really mention it, but PlayStation also has the PlayStation Camera, which is required for PSVR, and it's also required if you want to use voice commands and stuff like that. So it'd be nice. We were talking about it'd be nice if you could just chat using the microphone that would be built into your controller. Now, there's something to be said for the fact that a lot of companies have been caught kind of spying on their customers. Like Samsung has microphones in their TVs. which is a scary thing because they don't even have voice controls. Like there's stuff like that where it's really fucked up and weird. I've even heard stuff about Microsoft doing the kind of video spying on people with Kinect. So there's weird stuff there, but it would still be nice if it were implemented more smoothly either way. So
yeah, that's a write up to the Kinect. Maybe Dom will say something when he gets back, but I don't think he has any experiences really.
Probably not.
He had a 360, so he might have some experiences, but not a whole lot, I don't think. The next news story, I think, is a great news story for Jordan. Sunset Overdrive 2 could happen, but Insomniac states that they need a publisher. So this comes away of Joe Screbbles. I'm not going to read it entirely. I'm going to paraphrase a lot of it. But if you want to read the full article talking about the interview and stuff like that, definitely head over to IGN and check out Joe's article. But basically, Ted Price came out and said they're open to making a sequel for Sunset Overdrive, but they would need a partner for that. Sunset Overdrive is something that I know a lot of our fans talk about wanting to see the sequel. We need a partner for that. That's a big game. Sunset 2 would be a very large scope game. And also he continued by explaining that because the company wholly owns the IP, a new publisher means it could be multi-platform. This is great because the multi-platform thing is great, but I like the fact, I love when developers own the IP they work on, because it gives them the power for the most part, quote unquote. This is great because this means that they also, because they own the IP, still have all of those assets, which is great. So I hope that they find a publisher. I would love for Microsoft to publish it from the sense of it's a working relationship they already have with Sunset, because I think that's the most likely publisher that would publish this game. I don't know who else would jump in and publish this, I could see Ubisoft. If
Microsoft was going to do it, they already would. Yeah, I think there's definitely some publishers that would love to have this, especially with the renown that Insomniac has. And I said for a long time that Sunset Overdrive is such a PlayStation game, it's not even funny. Like, it would be so at home on that system, and I think that if there was a sequel to come out on PS4, that it would be bonkers, especially with the reception that Ratchet and Clank got and how excited people are for Insomniac Spider-Man. So that's the thing, man, is Insomniac is not first party Sony, but they are part of the Sony family, so for them to do that where they jumped over to Microsoft to make an exclusive for them, that's fine. They wanted to stretch their wings, that's cool, but you guys need to come on home, man. And I'm talking about Sunset Overdrive 2.
I think this would also satiate people who want another Infamous and might not get that. Not the same game, but I mean, like, playing in a world like that,
They're up there. They're close together.
Yeah, so awesome. Hopefully that happens. I enjoyed Sunset. Wasn't something I super fell in love with, but I did like the world and I like the mechanics and stuff like that. So yeah, I know there's plenty of people who always have these franchises that they want a sequel to and they never see it. So whenever we hear even the slight possibility of a chance, it's great. Whether or not I'm super excited for it, doesn't matter. I'm happy it's happening for people who want it. So
I'm glad they're open to the possibility. And Ted Price usually seems that way with most of their properties. So I appreciate his openness when it comes
I love
to
that
things.
him and Insomniac are very forward facing too. They're very communication driven. They like to talk to their fan base and stuff like that, and I love that.
I mean, obviously I've talked about how much I love Ratchet and Clank, and even some of Insomniac's other stuff I love. It's one of my favorite studios, always has been, and so I totally agree. And I think Ted Price has been in charge of that studio forever, and I think that they don't get enough credit because they're a big studio with multiple teams making awesome games. Their Ratchet and Clank reimagining on PS4 is obviously very well regarded. So yeah, shout out to those guys for sure.
I think they're underappreciated too, because they aren't first party, but Naughty Dog deservedly gets a lot of credit, but people don't often talk about Insomniac. And for me, when I heard that Insomniac was developing a console exclusive for Xbox, even though I didn't end up loving Sunset Overdrive, it still made me so happy because Insomniac is a developer I respect to the fullest. So. The last bit isn't necessarily a news story, But on Thursday, October 26th, as of recording this episode, I want to talk about the big three that came out, that are coming out on the 27th. Real quick, we're not going to have a huge discussion because obviously we're going to have our own opinions on them. But Super Mario Odyssey is currently sitting at a 97, which is like expected. Once again, could be a fantastic game, could be rose-tinted glasses. We don't know yet. I'm super excited for Odyssey. As you said, we're both pre-downloading it. Assassin's Creed Origin is sitting at an 84. Personally, what I expected it to sit at, I was pessimistic. It could be worse than that, but I'm glad to see that they hit that. I think a lot of people were on the internet were hoping that this would be like, Assassin's Creed terrible. But like we were talking about this before the show, Assassin's Creed is never terrible. The Assassin's Creed games at worst are good games. Like, yeah. That's a game that I'm going to be picking up, not on release, but it's going to be. I'm trying to space them by month. And I'm deciding if I want to do Shadow of War or Assassin's Creed next month after I've gone through Odyssey. But then the other game that I want to get to by the end of the year is currently sitting at a 90, which I think is a surprise out of these three, which is Wolfenstein 2. I expected it to review highly. 90 is higher than I assumed it was going to be personally. Like 97 for Odyssey makes sense. 84 for Origins makes sense. Wolfenstein, I was like, man, that could either be like a low 80 or a high 80. I didn't really see it hitting in the realm of 90s, and that's awesome because, and we'll have this discussion when Dom gets back. There's this apocalypse looking there's an apocalyptic view of the industry in single player games. So it's good to see. Yeah. It's good to see a solely single player game get a 90. And it's crazy that Wolfenstein decided to get political all of a sudden. Ever in its history. That's simply it. I just wanted to talk about the big three real quick. Obviously, we'll have more to say when we actually get our hands on it. Jordan and I will be back next week, and we'll talk about Odyssey, our initial impressions. And Dom will be back, obviously, and we'll get his impressions when he's back. I want to hop into our two topics, though. So our first topic is going to be related to an anniversary that's happening this week as of recording the show, and the second one's going to be about Halloween. So the first topic I want to talk about with you, Jordan, you might have a little bit more to say than me, so I'll go first and get through what I want to say because I think you'll have a little bit more to say than me, is PS2 memories. So it's the 17th PlayStation. It's a PS2 anniversary, 17th year anniversary to be exact, almost legal, and so I just want to talk about our favorite games, what we remember about the system. For me, the GameCube was definitely my primary console at this time. It was at a point where my family didn't have a whole lot of expendable income, so a majority of the time when I was tasked with getting a new game, I would more than likely get it on the GameCube than the PS2, hence me not having a whole lot of experiences, and I think I missed out on a whole lot of awesome things. I didn't play Eco. I didn't play Shadow of the Colossus. I have played it since, but not when I owned a PS2. My big memories I want to go through real quick. Jak and Daxter, obviously. Love the Jak and Daxter series. I didn't play through Ratchet & Clank, just something that didn't vibe with me at the time, which I kind of am upset about that I didn't get into. PS2 was big with the ESPN 2K NFL games, which there's a whole argument about people wanting the NFL license not to be exclusive anymore, so Madden has a competitor. It was also a big time, if you remember, for the street games. NBA Street, NFL Street. Loved those games so much. A shame we haven't seen those come back once again, the Madden exclusive license. I'm trying to think of, I didn't play Psychonauts, unfortunately. Grand Theft Auto Vice City, Grand Theft Auto 3, I played. Kingdom Hearts, yep. But like a lot of the big hitters, I didn't play. Like, actually, yeah, God of War as well, I played. But okay. Like I didn't play like the Final Fantasies, the Metal Gears, Okami.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean we were younger back then. That makes sense. Tell me, Jared, did you get up with my boy Sly motherfucking Cooper?
No, I didn't play Sly Cooper either.
Oh man, yeah. That's some good shit.
So that's pretty much it for PS2. The only other anecdote I have is that I didn't find out until I had my 360 that you could spin the PlayStation logo on the PS2 to match if you were standing it vertically or horizontally. Yeah. Did not know about that.
You're talking about the Slim.
Yeah, because that's the one I had.
Yep, same here.
Yeah, that's pretty much it for my PS2 memories. I enjoyed the system, but I didn't get a whole lot out of it. Still had fun with it. But I'm definitely not a PS2 guy. You know, it's not the console I claim when it comes to it. So.
Yeah, so in my opinion, I'd say this is one of the greatest systems of all time, and probably would be if not for the fact that it's followed up by, in my opinion, the two greatest systems of all time, PS3 and PS4. I think that, you know, when it's all said and done, it's going to be a toss-up between those two, and PS4 could certainly come out on top, but I mean, PS3 is just the fucking shit all day long. So, but yeah, PS2, man, that's my jam. It's funny that you mentioned, you know, being more of a GameCube kid at the time, because this was the third console of that generation that I got. So I had both a GameCube first, and then an Xbox, and then PS2 last. The reason being because it was more expensive than the GameCube, and at that time, it was when I was I was a young kid in elementary school, and my parents were. It was going to be much more difficult to convince them to buy a more expensive console. So I just kind of convinced myself the only way I was going to get one is if I was the cheapest, and went ahead and went with the GameCube, which I have so many fond memories of. I would say that's my favorite Nintendo console. We'll see if they fix some of the issues I have with the Switch, and if Virtual Console is ever actually a fucking thing. You know, we've got some road to cover if Switch is to be taking that crown. But anyways, back to PS2. Even though I got it a little bit later than the other two in that generation, I still played it probably the most out of those three, I would say. And not only that, but played it very far. Like, I was still playing that when I had a 360, you know, so still going back to those games. Yeah, I think that the games is where it succeeded the most. You know, it had a great controller, really solid. It had a really cool look, even if you had the original fatter one. It was just, I'd say, the coolest looking console of that generation. Especially that Slim. I mean, that Slim is just gorgeous. Still is. We still got that same one over at my mom's place. So, you mentioned a lot of the games that I was super into. Obviously, you didn't play Sly, so Sly Cooper is where I got so far up Sucker Punch's ass, you might say, since I always talk about them. Those are the guys that have been making the infamous games for years now, and hope to fucking God they'll reveal the next game at PSX. We'll see what's up then. But yeah, that's the era of the Sony exclusive platformer with Jack, Sly, and Ratchet is just a really special time, especially since I was elementary, middle school there, and so it was perfect time for me to be enjoying those games. And then you have Kingdom Hearts, which I've talked about before, about how cool that the concept of that game was, and how crazy I think it is still to this day, especially since we're still getting games in that universe, that Disney and Final Fantasy characters were combined for one of the most interesting and crazy crossovers of all time in any media. So yeah, I've spoken a lot about Kingdom Hearts. But then there's other games, you know, back then I was still into sports games, so I played, like NCAA football and Madden just non-stop on those consoles. You know, you'd have a dynasty going and just play through a whole fucking season with your team, and you could customize your jerseys and create teams and stuff. A lot of fun memories with those. And then, you mentioned the street games, which were really fun. Which is interesting because I almost couldn't be paid to play a sports video game at this point in my life, but back then they were still a really big part of my catalog. And then, still kind of in the sports realm, you've got stuff like ATV Off-Road Fury, games like that are more like extreme sports. Of course, the Tony Hawk games are big, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater games, I should say, and yeah, those are a lot of fucking fun. Did you play those back in the day? Like, especially like ATV, you play those games?
No, I was never a car or Even ATV, it's not a racing. It is technically like a racing, but they just never did it for me. They seem really boring.
Speaking
but Tony Hawk I played.
Cars. Hell yeah, of course. But speaking of cars, got to give a shout out to Burnout 3 Takedown, which I fucking love. It's not. I wouldn't say it's my favorite Burnout game. That's probably Revenge.
Was Driver on the PS2? Sorry to interrupt you.
I think so.
I like Driver a lot, which is weird because I don't like racing games, period, but I like Driver a lot.
Yeah, which is weird because it was like kind of the like the poor man's Need for Speed or Burnout at the time, which is funny. But yeah, those racing games I loved. I loved Burnout 3 Takedown, and then you got Need for Speed, like the Underground games, and then they had tons of Need for Speed games back in that time. And then, of course, I got to give a special shout out, Jared, a very, very special shout out to one of the greatest video games
I knew it was coming.
was ever created, and certainly Naughty Dog's best game by a mile. I mean, Jack X Combat Racing. Does it get any better than that? I think one of my favorite parts of that game is the little banter that they have while they're racing around, and Jack would constantly be going, "Wham bam, thank you ma'am," because it's like combat racing, right? Obviously it's in the title, and so you're like blowing people up, and then he'd say that line all the time. I'm like, fuck yeah, dude. Funny thing, I don't know if I've ever mentioned about that game, Jared. They had and I read this on Wikipedia after I had already bought the game and was having issues with it. They had a manufacturing issue with the discs.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't necessarily play right. And so the solution that I found before I actually even read the Wikipedia article was to just put the game case itself on top of my PS2, because it would just think that I had ejected the disc when I hadn't. And I was having trouble with it fucking with my saves and stuff, so I would just put the empty case itself on top of my PS2. I would never put something on top of my console otherwise, but I found that gave it just the enough right amount of pressure to keep that disc where it needed to be from fucking up. So really rare issue there. Trying to think of any other PS2 gems that I'm missing. I'm sure there's some. The Battlefront games are obviously a big deal. Guitar Hero, I remember getting. I still have the box from Guitar Hero 2 where I got the red guitar in the game. Man, I could go on and on and on about PlayStation 2.
Was Toomba a PS2 game?
I think that's PS1. You got some funny choices here with your poor man's platformers and your poor man's racing games.
Tomba deserves a reimagining. I wouldn't say a remaster. That game would not hold up today. I'm checking real quick. I did a little bit of research. Yeah, it's PlayStation and then it's backwards compat on PS3. So, unfortunately, Toomba, you don't make the list. Get out of here.
Since you are already surfing the web, would you mind going to PS2's Metacritic list and seeing what some of the other, just looking at the top games?
Let's see here. Hold on. Yeah, I got to go to Legacy real quick. I think that's where I have to go. Let's see.
Going back into the archives.
Top 10 PS2 games. I'll run you through the list real quick before we head to the Halloween topic. 10, Devil May Cry. 9,
sure.
Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 4, which I was a fan of. 8, Madden NFL 2003.
Nice.
7, Gran Turismo 3.
Nice.
6, Grand Theft Auto Vice City. 5, Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. 4, Metal Gear Solid 2. 3,
nice.
Resident Evil 4. 2, Grand Theft Auto 3. And the number one PS2 game of all time, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater
Jack
3.
X. Oh. It's funny that several of those games, it's obvious why I didn't play those when I was fucking in elementary school, playing GTA or whatever. My mom would never have allowed that, but a lot of those are more mature games. But that's another good point, Jared, is that a lot of the games that I played as remasters on PS3 or maybe even the PS2 classics, since I can't play the fucking PS2 games that I bought on PS3 on my PS4. But games like, you mentioned Metal Gear Solid 2. The Metal Gear Solid 2 and 3 Snake Eater is I would say my favorite Metal Gear game. That's obviously a PS2 game. Snake Eater's fucking awesome. Prequel to the entire series, so you don't need to know all this crazy knowledge. And it introduces all these different characters in such interesting ways. It's like it has this intro like a James Bond movie, and it's this this really interesting thriller where you're going through a jungle that doesn't exist in Russia, and going through all this crazy shit. You witness Big Boss's eye, him losing his eye for the eye patch, and so much cool stuff about that game. So yeah, there's a bunch of games I didn't mention that I didn't play on the PS2 but are still PS2 games, so
yeah,
shout out to that console, man.
Great console. Yeah. Before we head out really quick, I wanted to what we're gonna do, Jordan, very simple. Since it's Halloween time, this is gonna come out before Halloween, or at least on Halloween Day. I want each of us to request one horror game that we feel like people should play since they're in the mood for horror. Really quick, I'm going to exclude the games that came out this year just because I think we should say something older. But if you haven't been paying attention this year, really good horror games. Outlast 2, fantastic. Resident Evil 7, fantastic. Evil Within 2 looks good. Especially if you're a fan of Evil Within. And Little Nightmares doesn't get a lot of talk. 2D platforming horror game, I think is really good. Doesn't get talked about enough.
It's one that I hear shout outs for it,
Yeah.
I definitely hear that. And also shout out to Observer. We've talked about that on this show.
I'll go first real quick. It was a toss-up for me personally because it's like thinking about your favorite horror. I shouldn't say this isn't our favorite horror game. This is a game we recommend. I'm going to cut mine into two things because I'm not going to say a whole lot. I think Until Dawn is a game you should play if you own a PS4. I think it's great. It's one
I
of
guess you've watched people play through it since you don't have the console.
Exactly, and I still got enough enjoyment out of it. Like I could just imagine playing through the game. I wish Xbox had a game like that. I wish more games like Until Dawn existed, where it's I don't know, big budget Telltale, I guess, or something you would call it. I don't know.
Yeah, kind of, yeah.
So yeah, I think Until Dawn is great. Play it with a significant other. Play it by yourself. Play it with friends. I think it's a good time. And the other one I want to talk about that doesn't get a whole lot of talk, because I could say Dead Space and stuff, which I love Dead Space, but I think that's something people already know about.
I was going to say we should at least, just between the two of us, since we are such a big fan of that game, and the studio just got totally bent over and closed down, I think we should at least give that an honorable mention.
Yeah, Dead Space for sure. If you don't know about that game, you should go play it. One of the coolest. I think they were very creative with the shooting mechanics and the HUD and everything. Fantastic game. Hearing my friend on the Xbox party play through that game for the first time earlier this year and still be scared out of his mind was great.
Hell yeah.
The game I want to shout out though real quick is Amnesia: The Dark Descent, and it also has a sequel called Amnesia: A Machine for Pigs. These are PC games that I don't know if they ever got ported to console. I know they never came to Xbox. I'm not sure.
Not only that, Jared, but the Amnesia collection it was either last month, but I think it's this month, is free on PS Plus.
Worth it. These games are fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not pushing high-end graphics, but the atmosphere and the sense of dread and just the weird
mechanics
shit that happens. Yeah.
True survival horror.
Exactly. I love the Amnesia games. I think they're some of the most underappreciated horror games out there. Absolutely love them. There's a lot of other games we can say, but I don't want to go on forever because we are running long. So, yeah, for me, Amnesia and Until Dawn, I would say, and obviously Dead Space goes without saying. So, what about you?
Hell yeah. So I'm going to give a shout-out to a game that you kind of already mentioned. You mentioned Outlast 2, which came out this year, but I want to shout out the original, which I played earlier this year. Outlast and also its DLC, Whistleblower, are fucking fantastic first-person survival horror, and the concept of them is very cool. The mechanics, which absolutely are influenced by Amnesia, are very well done. You've got this camera. You're like a journalist, so you've got this camera, like a camcorder type deal that only has so much battery, but that's the only way that you have night vision. and it's just a very terrifying game, very good atmosphere. You're going through this insane asylum. I have yet to play Outlast 2, even though I have it downloaded. I'm definitely thinking of that being my Halloween game for this year, but absolute shout out to the original Outlast. I love that game. And then an honorable mention for me, Jared, which is, in my opinion, one of the best stealth horror games. Not horror stealth, but it's a stealthy horror game that most people don't give it the credit for being, having the horror elements that it does, and that's the original BioShock.
Hell yes.
A lot of people don't realize that this, in a lot of ways, is a fucking horror game. This is the only game that's made me, I'm a lot less terrified, especially when it comes to movies and horror, because I'm really into the production of film. Video production itself was my major before I dropped out of college, and so a lot of times I'm looking at things from a completely different angle, and I'm kind of able to see behind the scenes, even if I'm not watching an actual behind the scenes featurette. So that kind of takes some of the scariness out of horror games. I get why some people are almost unable to watch certain horror, play certain horror, because they get so into it. But that is some ways a good thing for me, because then it means that there's nothing too scary for me to experience. But the reason I explain that is because the original BioShock was one of, if not the only game, but even piece of media that has ever truly terrified me, and the only game that has made me scream out loud in terror. The part where you go into this area where it's one of the only parts like this in the game, Jared, where you walk into this room and it's got like these grassy areas, and it's like a park inside.
Yeah.
And the guy with like the mask, he's the splicer with the mask, and I think it has like horns coming off of it. You remember this?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I think they're horns.
He's chasing after you, and he can like disapparate, almost like a Harry Potter reference there for you. He can teleport, I guess is the way to put it. So he could just teleport around while you're trying to find him and kill him. And I was running around, in BioShock, it's a first-person shooter. You're picking up ammo. You're picking up items along the way. I'm trying to find him. He's really quick with his teleportation, and it's hard to fuck with him. And so I go into this corner, and I'm picking up this ammo or whatever, and then I turn around, and he's right behind me, and he just teleported right behind me while I had turned around towards the wall. So I turn back around, and he's just right there in my face, and I'm like, like freak the fuck out. And it scared the shit out of me. And with the splicers and the atmosphere of that game, and just so many of the levels that you encounter, that game has a lot of horror. I'm trying to remember the artist's name. You remember who I'm talking about? The artist,
H.R. Geiger?
What's that? No, not a real artist though. Shout out to Giger right now. Since we're talking Dead Space, which is heavily influenced by Alien. No, he's the artist within the BioShock universe.
Dang it, the name escapes me.
It's
let me
it's
Google
on
real
the
quick.
tip of my tongue.
Let me see. Hold on.
Yeah, but his level is so fucking scary. It's so bone chilling, and the. Just the degradation that society has gone through is really horrific. And so, that game is a stealth horror game in a lot of ways. And a lot of people don't talk about it in that sense, but definitely one of my favorite horror games, if you ask me.
I'm trying to look for it real quick, trying to find it.
But he's got some really scary parts when you go into his area, and he's like, playing with shadows, and he's banging on his piano, and he's got
Sander
Cohen? Sander Cohen, that's correct. Yes, indeed. Very interesting character. Very scary part of the game. Very scary part of a truly terrifying game in many ways. So, a Halloween shout out to BioShock.
Yeah,
and it's something, there's a lot of scary parts in BioShock Infinite, but it's something that you don't get nearly as much because in the original BioShock, you're down underwater where the light is only coming from inside the actual installation. So it's not like Infinite where you're up in the clouds and there's sunlight beaming in from every single angle for the most part of the game. It's like, that really changes up the atmosphere, and I think that's really what BioShock is. And so when they went to Infinite, it is a good BioShock game, but it lost a lot of what I think that series should really be about.
Yeah, I think with that, those are horror recommendations. I think best horror vertical slice goes to PT. A shame we'll never see that.
We gotta give a shout out to that.
Yeah,
give a shout out to that.
But yeah, before we head out, let's hop into what we're going to be playing. Odyssey, obviously, is a no-brainer for us. Going to be doing the Destiny raid again, trying to get that raid armor completed. What else am I going to be playing? Trying to think about it. Going to be, maybe, if I have time, chipping away at Cuphead. Nothing else for me. I don't think too much on my plate. As far as movies and TV go, I'm almost done with Season 3 of Rick and Morty. I just finished...
Yeah,
I'm really close to the end. I'm really loving that show. And I recently finished Atypical, which is a Netflix original series, and it's a coming-of-age story about a high school kid with autism. I think it's a really good show because it's entertaining and it also sheds a lot of light on autism in general, something that is kind of still a taboo topic in the United States. It's not something we have a lot of stories pertaining around. Like, there's not a lot of stories about autistic people that aren't documentaries. You know what I mean? This is cool because it basically paints autistic people just like anybody else, Coming of age story, showing how they deal with things in real life just like anybody else does. Great acting. The story's really good.
Speaking of the acting, if I can draw a line there, if I'm correct, the boy who is the main autistic character in that show is the boy from a movie that I absolutely recommend during this season. It Follows. I'm pretty sure that's the same guy from It Follows.
It might be.
And I absolutely, if you have not watched It Follows, highly recommend that. That is a wonderful horror movie.
And also, I haven't gotten around to seeing Blade Runner. I'm still going to see it. It's just I've been busy. So as far as my movie schedule goes, it's pretty busy because I still want to see Blade Runner. That's not something I'm just skipping on and waiting till DVD. It's something I still want to get to the theaters and see, which is unfortunate that a lot of people don't feel like me. It's a big couple of weeks for movies. I'm interested in seeing Jigsaw 2, which I'm kind of like hopefully optimistic on,
Yeah.
I love Saw 1, 2, 3.
It didn't look very good.
Yeah,
the trailer did not look very good.
I love Saw 1, 2, and 3. I don't really consider 4 through 7. They're not my Saw trilogy. And
I've only seen the original Saw, and I really did not like it very much.
Wow.
I thought it was okay.
Yeah.
I thought it was, I felt like people had been overrating it.
Yeah, so I really want to see Jigsaw. But that's one that I might just wait till DVD or digital or whatever.
Sure.
That's something I'm not.
You could do that.
Then
you excited for Thor?
Yeah, Thor comes out November 3rd. That's what I was gonna say. Super stoked for that. November 5th, there's the limited run of Pokemon the movie I Choose You, which I'm super stoked for. Definitely want to see that if it's in theaters near me. There's this horror movie, The Winchester something that comes out in the next couple of weeks. It has
I think
not Kate Blanchett. It has I can't remember her name. Helen Mirren? Yeah, that sounds right. I think it has Helen Mirren in it playing the lead.
Yeah. I know what you're talking about.
And then Justice League, which I'm hopefully optimistic for. Interesting stuff. That it's going to be less than 2 hours, which is crazy considering we're used to the Zack Snyder 2.5 hour movies.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think
or the director's cut, which is pushing 3.
Well, and the interesting thing is a lot of people are like, "Oh, I can't wait because it's condensed, and it might be that it'll tell a more linear story, and everything will be a lot tighter fit, and everything will be a lot more easy to understand." My worry is that if it's a movie that was meant to be a 2.5 hour movie and they condense it,
right,
what if it's even more confusing because you condense everything?
Yeah.
That's my big issue. I want Justice League to be good. If you're a fan of Marvel movies, you should want Justice League to do well, and you should want the DCEU to do well because competition is best for everybody. That's pretty much it. I'm stoked for a bunch of movies. Going to be playing Super Mario Odyssey. I cannot wait, man.
Fuck yeah.
Cannot wait. Also, I'm going to be picking
hours away.
I know. I'm going to be picking up Dead by Daylight because my friends wanted to play that. It's a multiplayer horror game, and it's on sale, so I'm going to pick that up as well. Yep, that's pretty much it for me. What about you, Jordan?
Yeah, so got Mario Odyssey downloaded. I don't know if you did this, Jared, but there's a system update as well, so I would recommend that. Mario Odyssey unlocks in about 3.5 hours. Very excited for that, and probably I'll probably play a little bit of both that and AC tonight. As you mentioned, the couple of movies coming out pretty soon I'm really excited about. Got my ticket for Thor after we record our podcast next week.
Hell yeah.
And then, I've been, with Justice League, that's something I've been waiting around for since, probably 10 plus years, reading articles about them making that Justice League movie. So
they released another trailer this week. I didn't see it. I'm like, another trailer. Oh my God. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Guys out there listening, the no trailer life is
great.
Incredible. It's so good. I mean, video game trailers are different because I want to see the gameplay. I want to see if it's something I'm interested in. But movie trailers, it's so great not knowing anything about a movie when you walk into it, and I love that. So some of the stuff that I was wanting to talk about at the beginning of the show that I was forgetting on was the comics that I've been reading. So stop me if you're interested in any of these comics, Jared. I read 1 through 5 of The Old Guard.
On my list?
Really great. It is on your list?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a really great Image comic. Most of these are probably going to be Image comics because they're fucking on fire right now. But The Old Guard is about these immortal beings who have like an elite squadron of kind of assassins, I guess you'd say. And really, really cool. The art's really interesting. The coloring I think I like more than the actual pencils themselves. The drawings themselves are a little bit off, especially the characters' faces. Like for some reason, all the characters have like really ugly noses. Like they all look like butt faces in a way. Like some really fucked up noses in this comic. But other than that, really, really good stuff. And then I've been reading Batman, both Scott Snyder's run, which I never was able to finish, even though I started it a couple times, as well as catching up on the most recent Batman, which I've kind of been going through a little bit slower than they've been released. So I'm not too far behind, about 10 issues behind there, or so I should say. And then also reading Scott Snyder's new Batman, which is All-Star Batman, which is about... it's kind of a complicated plot, but basically Two-Face is able to release all of everybody's online secrets, so it were. And so Batman is getting him away from Gotham, I should say, because everybody's trying to get to Two-Face. And so Batman's trying to get him out of there, and so it's a really interesting, like, weird, fucked up road trip that they're on, that he's carrying us through, and it's really, really good. And the art by John Romita Jr. is really fucking cool and very colorful, something you don't really see a lot of in Batman. At least these popping, brighter colors, I should say. So really cool stuff there. I gotta give a huge shout out to Black Cloud, which is also Image, and it is about a world where imagination can become reality. So kind of like if you wrote a story, or if you drew a character, you would be able to turn it into a real thing. And it's got multiple dimensions and some really trippy stuff. I want to say I've talked about psychedelic experiences before on this show, and I think that I've realized, especially this week, how deeply ingrained that is in comics right now, especially in the more independent scene with Image and stuff like that. So it's really cool to see that comic writers and artists are absolutely embracing that, and something I love, so something that's very close to my heart. And then also I got to give a gigantic shout out to our boy, we love shouting out Max Landis, his mini series Superman American Alien, 7 books, 7 issues, And, I'm not a huge Superman fan for a lot of the reasons that most people don't like Superman, but, obviously I'm really fucking into Batman, and I love DC. I love Superman and the Justice League and stuff like that, but his solo comics have never really tickled my fancy. But man, this one is so well done. It's a different artist for every issue that Max Landis writes, and really well done, really cool stuff that he puts that character through, and just some of the spins that he gives to it are almost Telltale-esque, the way that they're treating their Batman story right now. So very, very highly recommended. Almost can't say enough nice things about that, and about Black Cloud too. I got some really happy with the way those two series have turned out. So reading some other comics too, but that's what I'll leave it at, because those were some of my favorites that I've been touching upon. So I'll probably finish up Mindhunter as well. Very excited to see the conclusion of that first season. It looks like they're going to be doing more of that, and I'm really into psychological thrillers and crime thrillers and stuff like that. So, and obviously David Fincher. So, very cool stuff there. And like we said, those cool movies coming out. We got awesome games coming out. Of course, I should give a shout out to Stranger Things Season 2, also coming out tomorrow. A lot of good media entertainment coming out tomorrow on October 27th, 2017. So lots of cool stuff, man. Happy fucking Halloween,
Yeah, I agree with you. It's a good time to be alive. So that was episode 76. Not to be confused with 176, which I was about to say. Adding an extra 100 episodes. So we're not gonna have Dom next week. It's gonna be another two-man podcast. But if you can, please follow us on Twitter. We're at CTRLINT. It's Controlled Interest abbreviated. I am at Jared _. Jordan is at Mellow Modus, and Dom is at Dom's Oreos. As well, if you can, please go and follow us on iTunes and rate and review us. That would definitely help us out as well. It always does. Subscribe to us on YouTube, as always. And it's pretty much it. It's going to be a heavy week of gaming. A lot of stuff coming out. I didn't even mention Stranger Things Season 2 coming out too, which is like another thing on top of the... So much to do. October 27th will go down in history. That's pretty much it. And we'll catch you guys next week. Bye.